All right, Reese, what are we talking about today?
We are going to hash out the pros and cons of cost plus and fixed price with a couple of our friends. That Brad Robinson, Bradford Customs down in Atlanta, Scott Bland, Jim Bland Construction in Waco, and we're going to be digging into that.
All right, cool. So we got a debate here.
Yeah, we're gonna let the boys go back and forth. Scott's team cost plus, Brad's team fixed price. I think it's gonna be really engaging. There's a lot of depth to this episode, a lot of rationale to both sides. Candidly, I'm sitting here like, how do you make a decision? And it still just boils down to risk, in my opinion, business model, what you're trying to do, both resulting in, I would say, fairly insulated outcomes.
Yeah. I would agree. Before this podcast, I was probably pro cost plus, but Brad made some good points. So hopefully by the end of the podcast, the audience will be able to pick for themselves, or at least learn things.
Totally. Well, and that's what we're going to march through. We're going to march through the risk management side of things, profit potential, overhead, quality and project outcomes, transparency, trust, client satisfaction. All of this goes into how builders make these decisions. And I think, probably more common than not, builders are making that decision on economic climates, client base, et cetera. So this is going to be a good one to dive into. Welcome to episode 5 of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. I'm your host, Reese Barnes, along with my co-host, CEO, co-founder of Adaptive, Matthew.
Oh, hello, I'm Matt. Reese, what do you call me?
Dr. Dollar, as we call him here on the podcast. And we're joined here with 2 guests. We have Brad Robinson of Bradford Custom Homes, along with Scott Bland of Jim Bland Homes down in Waco. Fellas, quick intro.
Sounds good. I'm Brad Robinson. I'm the president, co-founder of Bradford Custom Homes and Remodeling. We're a design build firm down in Atlanta, Georgia, focusing on mostly luxury, high-end custom homes, but also with a large focus on high-end remodels. So big pop tops, additions, basements. Thanks for having me.
Top. Pop top. Go ahead, Scott.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. I'm Scott Bland. I am the president and owner of Jim Bland Construction, which is a family company my father started in 1974, and I came back to Waco and bought from him in 2007, and I've run it ever since. We are also 95% of what we do is custom new builds on the high end, which for Waco is in the upper 6s to 2 million is our range on high end custom. We also do high end remodels. We will not do remodels in houses where people are living, just because it's not something we do well. But full scale renovations and additions are definitely big for us. We also do light commercial. I've got family that owns a large commercial construction company, and we do a lot of commercial finish out and things of that nature. So we try to run the gamut and offer as much as we can. I've actually got a massive renovation with a commercial job attached to it by the same owner. So it's great to be able to pivot and to do those things. So
love it.
That is us, and we're here in Waco in the land of renovation.
All right,
so.
All right. This is a financials focused podcast, so we also need to get a quick sense. What's the rough construction volume per year from each of you here? What do we got head to head?
So volume on our end, about 7 to 9 million. So nice little sweet spot.
Nice healthy business there. Yeah. You have, Brad. Nice little 7 to 9.
We're 5 and 7, between 5 and 7.
All right. Cool.
Okay. All right. Now we don't have to be comparing revenues here. No.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I'm in Builder 20. That's all we do in Builder 20 is we compare revenues among our group.
I do love a good Builder 20 group. I think it's a great thing for the industry. But even just for our listeners,
I love it.
If you're tuning in, the Builders Budget and Beers podcast is intended to create conversation around project financials, construction accounting, make it less intimidating, a lot of builders, they hire people, outsource people, bury their head, don't have a true understanding of cost against revenue, profit, etc. So that's what we want to do. We want to introduce warm conversation, very vulnerable conversation, talking about numbers, talking about wins, talking about losses. In this scenario, we're talking pricing models. But before we get into all of this, a very key component of the show is beers. So from our friend down in Atlanta, Mr. Robinson, we've got the Athletic beer. I plan on getting very buzzed up on this. Oh, wouldn't you know, it's a non-alcoholic. So we're going to go ahead and actually, I should probably be taking your lead on this, Brad. Maybe cut out a little bit more alcohol, but still have something in my hand that I can sip on. But I'm going to go ahead and rank this, and then we're going to go ahead and get into Scott's beer of choice, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But here's the inaugural taste. This is Athletic Brewing Run Wild IPA. Again, just to clarify, this is a non-alcoholic brew. It contains less than 5.5% alcohol. So here we go for the first test. Cool drunk. It really would. It tastes like a beer. This is a very good alternative if you're trying to not indulge in the alcoholic side, but you do like a nice hoppy IPA. I am a fan of IPAs. If you're not familiar, I am in Denver, the land of beards and craft beer. And this would pass. I mean, this is good. I'm pretty sure this is a San Diego beer, isn't it, Brad? San Diego, I think, is what I saw.
I think that's right.
Milford, Connecticut, and San Diego. It is brewed in the USA.
Yeah.
This is a good beer. I'm going to go ahead and, I would say
very good.
I would say it's like an 8.2. This is a solid beer. I mean, honestly, like if I'm like not trying to, really get after it on a Saturday and just some casual like drinking, I think you could fool just about anybody. So good beer choice. I think that actually might be one of the top scores we've had so far on the show. So a good one. Now, actually, before I'm getting a little anxious here, this is the first time I've had to test two of them. Modelo, very popular beer in Texas, Waco, which is where Scott's from. But isn't this the most purchased domestic beer in the United States now? I think it was after the little Bud Light gate or whatever we want to call it. I'm pretty sure Modelo rose to the top and is like one of the most purchased beers in the United States. Cross check that for me, Dr. Dollar.
That's right.
Yeah, give us a little cross check here. All right, but we're going to go ahead and do a Modelo, which always gets class points because you have to open it with a bottle opener and you get the little gold tin foil. No lime. We're just going off of beer, but that does impact, of course, the score. I'm biased because I drink a fair amount of these. Modelo is a good beer. It is a good beer, and from a domestic standpoint, just because it's not as high of a palate profile, if you will, as the Athletic, I'm going to go ahead and rank this one at an 8.1. Really, just to kind of spice up the conversation here. We're gonna again. We've got Brad doing more revenue at this point. We've got the Athletic at a decimal point ahead than the Modelo. We're it's got to kind of stoke the fire to really make sure that we really lean into this conversation.
Oh yeah, I think Modelo is number one now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what are the numbers on that? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
3.97 billion in sales, 2022. I got a little bit of a dated ranking here, but it's the best I could do with a quick Google.
It's kind of like looking at an estimate versus actual once a month. You're looking at dated information.
4 billion. That's true. We need more real time.
I had to.
Okay. That's a lot of beer.
Let's give the listeners a little bit of a framework so they know, what we're doing here. Kind of, it was always just one builder. Now we have two on here. The concept is us rolling out a series called This versus That. And today, this is cost plus versus that, which is fixed price building. Cost plus versus fixed price. Okay, that's going to be the conversation here. And get perspective from two builders who have done both models, are making decisions on what do we do in this economic climate or the type of business that we're trying to build and grow. So that's really where we're going to want to go. Let's just open this up. I mean, we kind of did a little bit of a background on history on the builders. So we'll go ahead with Scott and just give us your preferred pricing model and why you think it's the best.
I prefer cost plus. We've done both. We were pretty exclusively contract price up to about 4 years ago, and then switched over to all cost plus. But before that, the only time we did cost plus was on a job that was going to be more than a year. We would do those cost plus because there's so much variability. But about 4 years ago, just looking at the numbers, the clients have changed so much, and you're not finishing anywhere close to what you started with. So many changes, and when you started looking at the end of the year, bleeding money all over the place that you weren't catching because you weren't on cost plus, and things get busy, and sometimes it's just easy to let things go, and those things add up really fast. And we just got tired of finishing the year bleeding money.
Totally.
And before that, when we were on contract costs, we weren't having changes like we are now. You could hit some home runs here and there because you'd overestimate something and get a big win out of it. But those things weren't canceling the changes out anymore, and that's why we made the decision to just go all cost plus. And then when COVID hit and we had all the material cost run-ups and things like that, it sure helped a lot.
Build cycle, customer profile. We'll go ahead and label COVID as commodities, right? With lumber packs going crazy, supply chain impact, all of that. So that's why Mr. Bland is choosing cost plus. Now, hello, Mr. Robinson. Isn't that a song? Could be. You probably get worn out with that one.
So
Mrs.
Scott,
Mr. Robinson.
Wrong gender. You're misgendering.
Well,
speaking of Bud Light,
DEI is the top of mind at Adaptive here, so we are very well aware of all this. Mr. Robinson.
Good thing you're not in Texas.
Hey,
DEI is now illegal in Texas.
I thought UT did pass that. That was an interesting move. UT is doing away with that.
The university, well, the state did. The state government passed it, and any entity that gets state funding cannot have a DEI department. And 200 people lost their jobs.
All right, Scott. Different podcast for a different time. Let's reel this back in here.
I'm not passing judgment, right or wrong. I'm just telling you what happened.
Scott, you said you kind of gave a weak endorsement of cost plus there. You said you prefer it. Are you diehard cost plus, or are you slight preference cost plus? Where would you put yourself? We got to have a debate here.
Well, we're pretty diehard cost plus.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, it would
in the red corner.
Yeah.
Scott Bland.
Yeah, we haven't had much pushback, but I'm not going to give up a job over it. If we had a really good job and a client just absolutely was not going to do it, we'd work that out. But it'd take a pretty serious job to go fixed price at this point.
Yeah.
Scott says we'd work it out, resulting in the client doing a cost plus contract. We can work things out, ending on cost plus.
Probably so.
I love it.
Well, I mean, you just and that was the other thing. I didn't even mention it, but it got to the point where we had 38 allowances.
Yeah.
And at that point, we were quasi cost plus anyway.
Yeah.
At that point, and so just
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Brad. Let's hear it. What you're in the blue corner.
Yeah, there's no gloves on, the way that I look at it. I would say that you hit the nail on the head. Up until COVID, we had always been fixed price. And we looked at it from the perspective of we were trying to manage the client expectation and also trying to mitigate some of the negativity surrounding cost plus, which is price. If a client is sensitive to the price and they don't have 30, 40, 50% to move, if they make selections, we wanted to kill the anxiety there. So, and that's still a big reason why we do it today. But I think the reason that we shifted, we were fixed price. COVID moved us to cost plus. Once the market changed and I guess for a lack of better words, we put together a completely new system and new processes and added head count to be able to really strengthen our planning part of our process, right? So our pre-con agreement is intended to leave no stone unturned. And sure, there might be an allowance still given if a homeowner is having analysis paralysis and can't pick something, right? They just can't envision it, right? We can't provide them a drawing or a render that's going to build confidence in making that selection. before the house is even built, yeah, we'll hang an allowance out there and we'll work through that. But at the end of the day, we have a very rigorous qualification process for our clients. We are looking to work with very specific types of customers. And although those customers may have access to more capital, they still have a lot of concern about whether or not the price can move significantly. And, I would say 50% of our customers bill cash. The other 50% are going through a bank. And obviously having to keep an extra 15 to 20% in a bank account, as a method of self-preservation or hedging, you're asking that client now not to put up 20%, but 35 to 40%. That pushes a lot of customers out of being able to build custom. And so for us, it's always been to have a laser sharp focus on the customers and helping meet them in the middle. So fixed price solves for that. And, with a very robust pre-construction agreement, it gives us the ability to pretty much put a placeholder in effect for every single item that we're going to put in, whether that's a toilet paper holder or whether that's a mirror, right? We get down to that granular level of detail, and our customers walk into projects knowing, hey, this is exactly what I'm going to pay.
Yeah. Okay, great. So both of you talked about COVID being a little bit of a catalyst to getting into cost plus. I think that's actually a good lead in. When thinking about these two pricing models, there's probably four rough ways to think about it, four buckets you can place it in. There's the risk versus reward, right? It's a risk associated with COVID, right? And the reward, right? Take more risk, generally you can make more profit, more reward. I think there are the overhead implications. So how much more administrative work does your team need to do depending on the pricing model you choose? I think there are some questions around incentives. So like quality of the project based on the pricing model, right? What you're incentivized to do based on which model you've picked. And then overall, just hearing from you guys subjectively, which one do you think leads to better kind of client outcomes, feelings of transparency, feelings of trust, happier at the end of the project? So why don't we talk about it? Why don't we talk a little bit about the risk? Scott, how did you think about risk when it comes to choosing cost plus versus fixed price? Can you explain different levels of risk you're taking depending on the pricing models?
Well, I think there's a much higher level of risk on fixed price than cost plus. Now, one of the things that we have switched to, which Brad brought up, which was an excellent practice, is being much more rigorous on the pre-construction side. So that helps a lot with our clients. We have them now, we didn't used to, but we now have, they pick everything out before we start. We didn't used to do it that way. We had allowances. And so it was always just, well, look, you've got $15,000 for plumbing fixtures. And, if you pick more, if what you pick is more or less, you're going to save or have more on that end. Now we make them actually pick them out. We have a list and everything is priced by what they pick. So that tends to ease a lot of that discomfort that somebody might have going in with a cost plus deal, because everything is picked out and it's spelled out.
Yep.
And that helps a ton. That relieves a lot of the risk on the homeowner side of it, which relieves a lot of the risk on our side of it, because that is the one thing you worry about with cost plus. You get towards the end of a job and client says, crap, I don't have money. And that can happen. That hadn't happened to us, but we certainly heard the horror stories. And our cost plus model is every month the homeowner gets a cost to actual breakdown. They know exactly where they are on a month to month basis. However, that's assuming they actually read it.
Yeah.
And you certainly get those clients that, you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink sometimes, and if they're not paying attention to it, they're still going to be mad when they didn't expect something was over. And you can say, well, it's been on your cost to action for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't notice it. Okay. That's still your fault. It's still our fault.
Yeah.
We still bear the brunt of that. So,
yeah.
But we went to cost plus mainly because of the risk aspect of contract price.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yep. So fixed price generally higher risk. I think that risk comes in two forms, right? So risk increases if the project is going to take longer, because then your risk is exposed to the macro economy and what happens. So say COVID is a good example there. and then your risk increases given how custom the project is, right? Which you're talking about mitigating through figuring out upfront. So I think these combination of two factors increase risk. So generally, the higher the risk, the more unpredictability. Cost plus is going to protect you. However, I do think it's kind of important to note, it's easy to forget that the risk is not removed, right, from the construction project. The risk in the construction project exists. It's just a matter of who's bearing the risk, you or the client, depending on the pricing model that you pick, right? And I guess we can talk about that later with client outcomes. The other side of the coin here with the risk is profit potential. So, Brad, why don't you talk a little bit about maybe why you like fixed price and the ability to drive higher profits and how you think about that in your business?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say when dealing with a fixed price contract is our cycle times become top of mind priority, right? Because every one of our projects they're managed projects. So you've got a project manager sitting on that job. You've got a superintendent sitting on that job. You can absolutely erode every bit of what you've put into building that budget and underwriting that contract by going over your cycle time. So that, cost of labor is going to be more expensive than anything, right? But to the contrary, if I'm in a, cost plus contract, I'm showing how many hours it takes to manage that job. You mismanage that job, you open yourself up for a tremendous amount of risk with that client. And then it as well as I do, they're going to start picking you apart. So what I would rather be responsible for is our cycle time and how well performing on that job and holding my people accountable to hitting those cycle times, number one. So I prefer not share that, right? That's my business. That's not any part of what a homeowner needs to be dealing with, right? They're paying me to build the house. They want the end result. That's what I'm focused on, right? So I'd like to just take that off the table, because now we're not having conversations about a potential mismanagement and a misallocation of capital or funds that they would much rather have going into their cabinetry or their countertops rather than my project manager or supervision time. So
yeah,
you talk about profitability though, right? So I think that the argument could be made that if you're in a fixed price contract, that there's some hedging that's going to happen. Your contractor is going to probably put 5 to 7% in there, just to make sure that they're not going to lose their tail for those cycle time increases or for production delays or for any other reason. Sure, you're right. That's in there. I treat it just like contingency, because contingency is a real factor, especially the further up you go in the food chain. You start talking about commercial construction of, skyscrapers, you have contingency. It is a natural part of project management. And so I think people are more inclined to accept the fact that, yes, you're going to have some of that in there. But what I would say is that if I don't like something, and I'm going through and I'm QCing a project and I rip it out of there, they love that feeling that they're not paying for that. They love the idea that that's not, they don't need to see what that line item billing is when the millwork company comes back and says, yeah, well, that's another $5,500. Well, that's not going to live on my job site, period. And I yanked it out. Whatever the cost implication is on me. And so I feel like there's just another layer of, you talk about client satisfaction. I would beg to say that my clients are happier in the pre-construction process. They're happier during the production cycle, and they're happier at the end because they had a commitment from us based on all of that time that we put in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I want to touch on, because like both of you guys take the build cycle into consideration, right? If I'm doing an 18-month custom new build, right, the argument from a cost plus guy is like, how could I possibly have somebody go through a multi-million-dollar home and pick everything down to the toilet paper roll holder, right? On that point, is that what you're talking about when you're baking in like your 5 to 7% on those types of shifts? Or I guess, Brad, how do you run a tight enough pre-con process and work with people that are willing to go down all of that pre-con and all of those selections processes on the front end? Whereas like a cost plus builder is like, yeah, I'm just going to manage this as we go. And I know on this date, we need to have windows ordered because we have this much going through.
I would say this, right? So the clients that we are qualifying have one thing in common. They are all very busy professionals. So sure, one of the major things that we have to overcome at the onset of a project is explaining the time commitment that they'll need to be willing to commit in pre-con to ensure a successful project. Now, that doesn't mean everybody is willing to do that. But what I would say is that most of the people that we are working with find tremendous value in that. And they themselves work in areas where planning is precedent or key to the successful projects that they might be working on or executing or pushing down their line. So there's a similarity in the value structure there. But I would take one step further and say that we are driving to a commitment of ensuring that they're happy throughout the entire process, which is what most people find so off-putting about building a custom home. So we just continue to drive value in that pre-con process, and until they understand, like, hey, we can do this in a very organized way to where it doesn't seem cumbersome to you. And our design roadmap was built for busy professionals. So maybe it's a little bit of our secret sauce, right?
Sure. Well, and inversely, Scott, like as the heavier cost plus guy, I mean, not as much pre-con, people are making decisions as you go. Like, are you taking that into consideration in your sales process when you're coming through? Or is it for you just more of like, yeah, we've got people that want to build a house, we want to win the work, and then we do all this selection process during the build?
No, we do the same thing that Brad does. And I think a lot of it is we have the same type of client too. They're all professional, very busy. And I've got a dedicated staff member, a selections coordinator. That's all she does. And that really helps streamline that process of getting that done. I just, whether it's cost plus or contract side, you get tired of somebody, giving them $10,000, let's say, for light fixtures, and then they come back to you and say, "Well, that's not enough. There's no way I could do this house for $10,000." You have to eliminate that. He's smiling. He knows he's been through it. We've all seen that movie, and so you eliminate that by having them pick things out before you ever start, and you price that. Then when they come back and say, "Well, I need more money," it's like, "Well, that's what you picked." Right. So the issue on the cost plus side that we get into maybe more than Brad does, are the changes. And 99 times out of 100, they're not everything they picked out at pre-construction. That's not what we end up with in the house. Things change.
We do,
but it gives you a baseline, and it gives you something to start with.
Yeah. So
Brad,
I guess I was going to say
we experienced that too. That's all I was going to say. We experienced the changes side too. Yeah. And, a good pre-construction process should lead to a smaller change order. That's the idea, is that we're going to minimize that. People still change their mind mid-flight.
Oh, yeah. And I would say the benefit on our side with being cost plus is that change order procedure. Very simple on the cost plus side. They make a change, it costs what it costs. It's in our contracts. If they request, they have to request a stop down and pricing. Otherwise, we're going to do what they ask us to do and go through it, and cost what it costs. Where we don't have that we eliminated that complicated change order procedure by going to the cost plus model. It just got there were so many changes. To your point, Brad, it was so hard to stay on any kind of schedule when you're stopping down every 6 or 7 days to price out another change, or you're just letting it go, and then again you're bleeding it out somewhere. You're bleeding it somewhere. It's coming out of something, and so going through that, we're very fortunate in Texas that our contracts are very, very weighted to the builder. It still amazes me sometimes when people sign them. It's like, wow, didn't really read that, did you? And I mean, we can on the contract side, if you go contract price. By our contracts, if a line item increases in cost by more than 10%, we can break the contract and raise the price of the house. I mean, that's people sign off on that every day, and that helped a lot of guys out during COVID. But to Brad's point, the more you can get them to commit to, the less of a battle it is down the line, even when they're making changes, because at least they know they started with a baseline that was workable, as opposed to then looking back at you and saying, well, you didn't give me enough money. And that was one of our biggest issues going in on the contract price side. We were trying to get through the pricing stage and get them to contract too fast and just plugging in numbers, and then it bites you on the end. That doesn't bite you in terms of losing money, but it bites you in terms of a satisfied homeowner, somebody who feels like they were taken care of through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that's on the front end. Brad and I we're very similar in that we've got a big front end process.
Yeah, the front end process. So Brad said one thing at the beginning of this piece, which I thought was interesting. We kind of accepted that fixed price is the higher risk model, and then Brad raised this point of, well, in cost plus, you open yourself to the risk that the client starts disputing, how well you're managing the project, right? You mentioned the labor hours specifically, and then maybe they don't want to pay. How often does that happen? Either to either of you, has that happened in the past? Have you heard of it happening to friends? How often does that happen?
It happens, yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't happened with us. I mean, the biggest thing we get is just at the end of the job getting nitpicky about whether or not something was returned and credits and things like that. That's you'll get that client that's out there counting every 2x4 out there asking, why didn't I get credit for that because it wasn't used. That's really the only conflict we've ever had.
It doesn't happen in month one.
That's how people are.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in month 1 through 6. It happens at project closeout, and then you're being held to almost not a contingency standard, but it's almost like retainage. It's like, hey, we're gonna true this up, and let's just validate. And then all of a sudden, you've got a 2-month period that goes by, and you might have 10 or 15% on the line for substantial, and then all of a sudden you're handcuffed, and in no way, shape, or form did I want to be involved in that anymore. And it wasn't a matter of whether or not we were doing anything, wrong or right. It was just a matter of when the dollars and cents get tight at the end of a job and all the money from the bank has evaporated, or not the bank, just period, it's everybody gets out their magnifying glasses and starts paying very close attention to those final bills. And, they don't understand, well, why am I paying for punch out? Shouldn't it have been done correctly? Well, of course, but maybe you've never built a custom home before. And, as much as I can educate one at the end of a project, when the power, it's not a power struggle. It's just that there's a paradigm shift in the relationship where there is no remaining work to be performed and there's only money due. There is a change. There's a changing of the guard that happens almost, where you have to go fight for the remaining balance. And what I see a lot of guys do is they pad it. They pad it so that last 10% now is a bonus, and I'm not interested in doing that either. That to me just doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel true. And it doesn't feel like you would do that in the spirit of partnership if that's what you're truly selling at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another interesting point. I guess we didn't talk about. You're talking about like essentially the risk at the end of the project, because you're constantly spending ahead of what you're collecting, right? Because it's a reimbursable model in cost plus. It's another piece of the risk. I think, Scott, you talked about this in our last discussion. You always get a deposit, right, to mitigate that risk?
Yes, correct. Yeah, we get a 10% deposit, and that deposit is not returned until the last draw. So if we do get a client that just decides, and it hasn't happened, thank God, but I learned this practice from a builder who it did happen to, where you get a client that just refuses to pay that last draw, wants to fight you over that last draw. And if you've got enough on deposit, you can just say, all right, pat them on the head and say, here's what's left out of your deposit after I deduct the final draw from it.
Yeah.
And write them a little check, and then, go on about your business. That's the way, for us, again, it goes back to communication and information, and giving that client, they get a copy of every invoice, and all the cost to actuals every month. So, at the very least, no client on our end can say I didn't know.
Yeah.
They always know. It's always right there. But again, of course, you can't make them read it, but they also can't deny that they've got it.
Yeah.
And that helps.
You can paint that picture.
And there are other things that you can do. You have a big overage on something, like we did this during COVID when material costs went crazy. We weren't eating those costs, but what we did was we passed the cost through, but we didn't apply our percentage to it. We just passed it straight through, and the clients appreciated that. We didn't have to do it, and it was like you said, Brad. It's a partnership, and we knew it was painful, and we did not want to. It just felt ugly to be profiting on their misfortune, and it wasn't right, and we didn't. And so we had a lot of very appreciative clients coming out of that. So there are always things, and you can do that on the fixed cost side as well. It's that works under any circumstances. Anytime you can find a way to be a hero to your client, like Brad said, the cabinet comes out that there's nothing particularly wrong with it. It just doesn't fit. It's just not right, and so you get rid of it, and you can't back charge the cabinet maker for it. It wasn't then, but you eat that cost. And we do that on the cost plus side too, because at the end of the day, I'm not D.R. Horton or Pulte. I don't have a $20 million advertising budget. My clients are walking, talking billboards for me, and it is worth it to me to eat a $5,000 cabinet than it would be to charge that back to the client, piss them off, and then lose $120,000 in profit on a job that I now didn't get because the person that would have given me the job asked them their opinion, and they said, that guy's a jackass. He charged me for this cabinet when he shouldn't have. So I know Brad's nodding. It's that same philosophy. All of us small custom guys, you live and die by your clients, and you kind of weigh that. I'd rather lose the $5,000 on this cabinet than the $120,000 on a job I don't get next year, and never knew I didn't get it. Yeah,
1,000%.
It's this interesting, interplay between like the client profile, like what their psychology is like, how well you set expectations with them up front, and then what the arrangement is, right? So I think the next thing we could talk about is kind of the incentives each of these pricing models create. So, the cynical person would say, right, people might act in their own interest. The fixed price builder, you're going to get a lower quality project because they're trying to control costs. The cost plus builder, you're going to get massive cost overruns, right? Why don't we talk a little bit about this? Brad, why don't you talk a little bit about how you think about that? How you stay true to your quality when you're trying to control your costs?
Yeah. Well, again, I have to point back upstream in pre-con, right? So if a client is, asking about whether or not they're going to get the same quality, right? I would argue that if I've specified properly and they have an understanding of what that value is for the product that we've specified, then there's no question, right? The structures that we build, the envelope systems that we build, all are a part of our pre-construction process where we're discussing that envelope, the methodology in which we're building it. We're obviously gearing up and playing in a space that's a little bit different than minimum code type of building, right? So we're talking net zero, we're talking about passive, we're talking about some high performance qualities in the structure. We certainly are not going backwards in terms of how we're building homes. So there's a minimum standard that we adhere to based on what our client's input is and their budget, of course. But we're not going with a lesser grade framer on this project just because they wanted to try to shoehorn it into a budget. It's our same framer that's doing that house, that's doing that, $2 million custom that we've got down the road. If I happen to be building that home for $600,000. So, are there things that they're not going to get? Sure. They might not get spray foam insulation. They might not get certain things, but it's still going to be a very well-built house. It's going to perform very well. And the finishes are 100% going to be shown, depicted, felt, touched, held weighed. However that customer wants to define value, they're going to have an opportunity to do that in pre-con. So, it all comes down to providing an expectation that, if they're looking to downgrade quality, it's going to be somewhere in the structure of the house, not necessarily the selections per se. So they're not getting lesser quality and going fixed price. We may have a benefit from time to time, but I'll promise you, we are just as open as exposed to concrete overruns and site work overruns as guys that are on the cost plus side. So we have to mitigate that with a certain percentage that we calculate. And, I'll promise you, we are going to absorb that somewhere else because we're humans and we're not perfect either. But as long as it balances at the end and whatever we're underwriting, we have an A+ rating on, we're happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of that comes down to like your ability to basically get the client to understand what they're agreeing to before it's actually built and really understand the quality. Scott talked about the client that might come out and count the 2x4s. You ever have anybody coming out to your sites and judging the quality of the installation of those 2x4s, kicking them, trying to knock them down? Does that ever happen in fixed price?
And fixed price? No. I mean, I find that the client that we build cost plus for, or we've built fixed price, they're the same. They care about the end result.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And Scott, what about you? Are you letting costs just run wild? You just, you're not worried about it just passing through?
Well, no, actually, I can present it, the cost plus side as being the least risk for the client because they see every invoice. They see every penny that went into the house. They get a copy of that every month. They can make an accounting for everything that's out there. So if I've turned in an invoice for something that clearly is not, I mean, that's as open, that's as clear as you can possibly be as far as communicating with a client. And when we were on the cost side, and Brad knows this, if when people make changes, you price a change in such a way that you can kind of help make up for an increase something somewhere else. So that there's always ways to make those things balance out. And in this case, on the cost plus side, they see all those overruns. So on the fixed price side, they might pay more for some type of beam work in a ceiling or something than they would if it was cost plus, because as the fixed price guy is going to price that in such a way to kind of help make up for things. It all balances out. At the end of the day, it all ends up being the same price. But from a quality standpoint, I've got to warranty it.
Yeah,
it's the foundation, the structure is my baby for 10 years, and so I've learned the hard way. We all have, that whenever I go to a lower price sub to try to save a little money, especially during the Great Recession, we were trying to get costs, trying to get any job you could. What I found is I spent way more than the money I saved fixing it because we didn't do it right the first time. So I do the same thing that Brad does, and it's a big deal to our clients that the framer I've got out there working on a $300,000 remodel is the same framer that's framing a $2 million house around. And those guys know if they want the $2 million job, they got to do the $250,000 job, and they got to do it well. And they all know that. And so you've got to have consistency in your product, especially as a custom builder. Somebody walking a $300,000 front entry, 60-foot wide lot house, it should have the same feel, the same quality as a $1 million house. Now, it won't have the same amenities, but the feel, the look, the quality of it should match, should always match. To Brad's point, it's not going to have some of the same nice, fun things in it, but the quality and the workmanship and the appearance is going to be the same across the board. So it has to be. As a custom guy, because you never know who's walking through your stuff.
Yeah. Reese, why don't you talk a little bit about the overhead implications of both? You talk about that.
Well, yeah, I think that is like an interesting point when you talk about you're marking everything up cost plus, right? We're marking up our costs, and that should include our overhead expenses, our margin. But then even like a fixed price guy, that's actually something that I'm curious, Brad, on your end, is like, how do you sign retainers or like pre-con agreements with your customers as you're going through, or is contract signed and you're ready to go? Like, how do you bake all this in to the overall price of the home? Like, are you like, you have agreements signed with your customer and then that's when pre-con starts? Or is this going to be all like relationship building on the front end, doing our hard bidding, getting them a number? How does that work with you? And how does that run into like the overhead costs that you take on a very diligent pre-con process?
Yeah. So no, we have a signed agreement and a retainer before any work's performed, right? We're not focused on getting the job off the street. That's not our primary concern. Our primary concern is running a profitable business. And so in doing that, our clients are going to sign off on the process, and they're going to sign off on how the costs are going to be absorbed in that planning phase. We do it on it's an hourly basis. Some guys have fixed costs for their pre-con process. They'll take you through it, but our customers come to us from various different places, right? An architect or a designer might send us a project and want us to competitively bid on that. And while there are certain projects that we absolutely want a shot at, we will make a venture investment into those type of projects. But if you're coming off the street and asking us to design a custom built house that fits you and your family like a glove, and you want to get into conceptual design through architecture, through interior design, through structural engineering, through, the end-to-end concept to keys, we'll do that for you. It just may take 6 months or 7 months, and going through the permitting process, and during that time you'll be paying into an ongoing retainer. And at the end of that engagement, you're going to come out with a itemized proposal that's going to tell you exactly what you're going to pay for that project. And nothing necessarily will end up in the construction contract. It is all baked into your pre-construction, which is where the work is being performed. So we have two contracts. So it's a 2-phase process for us. So we do it that way. Now, you kind of alluded to like your overhead in that. Now, yeah, every bit of our overhead is going to be calculated into that project. So our indirect overhead, our indirect construction cost as it relates to all of the functionality to operate the business, will be put into that project based on the timeline and the cycle and our run rate, obviously. But then, our project management time, our superintendent time, any time that we believe we're going to need for a designer to become involved in that project while it's in construction will be somewhat calculated or estimated. And then obviously all the costs that that we self-perform, there's a burdened labor rate that we're billing on top of that gets marked up as well. And then you have all of your direct performing subs. Those will be also calculated. Now, our process is not straightforward. It's not a fixed percentage across every one of those. So we use a variable price markup for each one of those, but we like to land at a specific gross margin that, we've come to a place we have a tiered system, and each one of those tiers have their price point or have their margin point.
Right. Well, and Scott even alluded to that in terms of like a fixed price builder might make more money on the fancy overhead beams to calculate other stuff. How do you choose? Like, how do you choose what to mark up certain things and not? Are you taking that as like an aggregate, like basically reverse engineering from that gross margin, and then finding the line items that we think we can pad a little bit more and we can consider a little bit more margin or markup? How do you make those decisions?
I wish I could take all the credit for it. I'll be honest. I hired a very expensive business consultant to come in and help us look at the national averages, and we.
Who was it? Let's give them a shout
out. It's Contractor Convergence. So out of Salt Lake, they're great folks. They've been amazing to work with. We've actually got another builder
expensive but worth it.
Expensive but worth it. I'll put it to you that way. I don't want to capitalize on the expensive part. I would say that it's worth it more than it's expensive. Expensive is relative. I would say, you add you put an extra zero at the bottom. Are they expensive anymore? No, not really.
Right.
So, and I would tell you that they have a collective, probably 60 years of experience between them, ranging, the entire gamut of the construction industry from, building resorts to building single family, so there's a lot of data set that they've been able to populate, and having that information for us to put through our own filter and then, right size for the marketplace here has been incredibly valuable for us, right? Like, I think buying data is the best thing you can do. So that's where my head's at with it. So we used a combination of those numbers and then did it on our own.
Got it. So they're just like, they're giving you like the national data that they have with the customers that they're working with, or however they're sourcing that data. And then you guys are plugging it in, and then that's giving you the insights to say like, we should really be marking up, I don't know if this is even right, but like our lumber framing packages, right? We should be marking this up significantly more. And you know that you're going to come through on plumbing because it's more consistent. Are you taking like sub labor and vendors into consideration? Or is this just like across the board data? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I showed you our we call it our hard input cost sheet, right? And that feeds into a stipulated sum margin sheet. If you were to look at that, each one of those has a color coded margin or markup that we have for each one of those categories, right? So if it falls within a category, it's going to be a variable price markup for each one of those services, which makes a lot more sense, right? Like, I can't mark up sub labor, maybe let's call it 1.63 on indirect, construction cost, but I can do 1.35 because that's more in line with the market. And so it's like, I look at those things, but what I really care about at the end of the day, right? I'm managing a business. I have to look at the aggregate of all of my projects combined. And I say, okay, well, I really want to be at, and remodel and new construction are completely different, but I would tell you that 25 to 30% gross margin is what we're aiming for in our business model, because we want to be profitable and we're here for the long term, not the short term. So are we more or less expensive? I would say that we're probably right in line with a, just depends on what markup you can get in your market. I know there's cost plus guys that are doing it at 12% and charging $25 for burdened labor. And I'm like, okay, so they won't be here next year. That's fine. But you look at guys that are 18 to 20% and charging, $95 an hour for project management. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for doing a solid to the market,
Right. Well, and I think that's like where it goes into, Scott, your take on this, because like with the cost plus builder, that markup is taking into consideration your margin and the other costs of your business. So like, how can you run like a 25, 30% margin business in a fixed price, but you might be running like a 10, 12, 15% margin business on a cost plus job at a 25% markup?
Well, we're lucky in that in our contracts, as long as I give a client at the beginning our cost breakdown, I can put all my office stuff above the line. And so I just have to, like what Brad does, you estimate it by percentage. And then we give, as part of our pre-construction agreement, Exhibit A is our breakdown of hourly cost, depending on the function. And about half of that is pre-construction stuff. So time spent in meetings, time with the selection coordinator, time of us estimate, all those things. We take that retainer and we don't touch it. So I take $5,000 and it just gets set aside. Everything else gets billed to them on a monthly basis. And then if we sign a contract, I'll take that $5,000 and make it part of their initial cash deposit. But everything else is billed ahead. It's completely separate. It doesn't factor into the cost plus part at all. That was just being paid for our time. And then that kind of tees them up so that when they get that first month's bill on the cost plus, and they see that timesheet breakdown, well, they've already seen it in the pre-construction process, so it's not new. They know what they're looking at, they know what they're seeing. So it's just like everything else in our business. It's all about setting expectations. And if you set those expectations in the beginning, you can carry that all the way through. But you drop something like that in there midstream. They've never seen a charge for fuel before on any of their line, but then on the sixth draw, they've got a $3,000 hit for fuel up to that point, and they're going to lose it.
Right.
Even though it may be perfectly legitimate, and you could have it all documented. But if that's not set from the beginning, you're going to have a hard time going back and plugging that back in. So, also above the line, 2% of all cost on estimate is put in as contingency, and it's an above the line contingency. So I can pull from that on extras And not only am I covering the extra, but I'm also getting my percentage on that as well. So, and it's all above board. It's all above the line. They see every bit of it, and it's a way to offset those overhead costs.
If you're 2% above, what's
in
your
a way that's palatable. I mean, what do you mean? Like our overhead?
Right. If you're like 2% of,
no, it's like 2% of the contract. So if I had a hard cost of $900,000, I would then take 2% of that, put it into contingency, then add it back to the $900,000, and then add our 15%.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah.
That makes. Yeah. I mean,
it's basically, and it's the way I describe it to the homeowner. It's just a bucket. It's just a bucket.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you decide to have the framer move a doorway over here or over there, add a door here over there, we'll pull it out of the contingency. Until the contingency runs out, you're on track, and they like that until it runs out.
Yeah.
And then they don't like it so much, but it gives a buffer. So they know they're over. They see that in the line item, but they also see it coming out of contingency, so they're covered.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, and this kind of, I mean, do you have anything to say, Dr. Dollar? Kind of big Excel there.
No, I was just saying I realized we were thinking we could do this in 30 minutes. I realized we still probably have a lot more to cover. We might need to do a part 2 here of this one.
Yeah. This has been deep.
Well,
yeah.
You know what Brad's talking about what Brad is talking about. If I put a plug in for Builder 20, what Brad's talking about, bringing in consultants, business consultants. It's a wonderful idea. Or if you're in a Builder 20 club, you basically twice a year you have business consulting with the other members of your 20 club, because you share everything, all of your financials, all of your best practices. And I mean, 20 club ain't cheap either. But it's, we bumped up multiple percentage within the first year of being in Builder 20 just from learning, realizing what I didn't know, and all the things I had no idea, because Waco's kind of an insulated market, and there's 2 other guys in my market that do the pre-construction contracts and charging by the hour for all those services, and both those guys are in other Builder 20 clubs. So the only 3 of us in our market that do those things, we're all Builder 20 guys, and I will freely share that with any other builder in Waco, because the more of those guys that are doing it, the easier it is for us.
Yeah.
But
that's like Brad's comment.
Probably, and I imagine Brad's the same way. way. If somebody comes into my office and I hand them that and they say, "Ooh, I'm not comfortable with that," then okay, well, I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
There's a guy down the street that'll do all that stuff for you for free, and that's your guy. I'm not your guy.
Yeah, I mean, you're setting the precedent for what the rest of that project's going to look like. And then look, maybe that customer is really trying to scrape it together to make that project happen, and maybe that builder is comfortable with carrying the risk that guy may run out of money. If you want to go in that tight, you may come out with no shirt on your back, and that's fine too if that's the kind of risk tolerance you have. But I'm not trying to be in business for a year and make a bunch of money and get out. I'm trying to create a legacy here. And in order to do that, you have to be profitable. You can't run a business on hopes and dreams. It takes real dollars. You want to invest in the best technology. You want to invest in the best, software that you can get your hands on. You want to service your customers the best. That's not the cheapest. There is a guy in a white truck that exists that you can call. That is a thing, and they'll do probably a great job. But the risk tolerance is probably just much higher than mine.
Yeah.
Probably ignorance is bliss.
We don't balk at paying our doctor, our mechanic, our attorney, our accountant. We don't bother paying them for their time. So why should I be expected not to charge for mine? That's always been our argument on our side of it, is that we should be. My gosh, your house is your biggest investment. Why would you not treat your builder the same as you treat your doctor or your lawyer, or your accountant? And my time has a value, and you have a sheet which tells you exactly what that value is. And somebody that balks at that, again, like to Brad's point, there's a guy out there that'll build your house. Now he may not be there in 2 years when you need to get something fixed, but he'll build your house today.
Well, and that goes into like one of our last points. We've hit a fair amount of the list. Matt. So we're good. We're covering ground. But this is a good little segue into transparency, trust, and client satisfaction. I was at a little plug for Curious Builder podcast, Mark Williams. You're my boy. I was up at his roundtable in Minneapolis last week, and he had a construction attorney come in and speak to a bunch of builders in the Minneapolis area. And the whole theme of the conversation was contracts, right? Lien waivers, change order contracts. How do we actually facilitate fixed price, cost plus? How do we insulate ourselves as a builder? Where I'm going with all of this is there were some pretty high profile builders. There were some pretty reputable and recognizable brands. And this guy's sitting at the end of the table saying 40% margin. They're not into it. I'm out. And it's like, this guy's like, he's got a great brand. They do a great product. They're not running a huge business. But when you are building something for legacy, when you do have a brand, when you have a reputation of quality, and to your point, Scott, it's like maybe 40% is gouging. I don't know. But at the end of the day, what is that person providing, and what are they doing that the guy in the white truck isn't? And I think that it's totally, I am totally in the camp of you, Scott and Brad, of like, this is a huge investment. And you're not hiring somebody that's on a whim trying to do this and, make some money and get out. You're looking at somebody that's wanting to build a legacy product that family after family after family can move into and move out of, and not worry about issues in the home and big remodeling projects, not out of necessity, not out of want, right? You guys are building that quality product. So even just to put it back on you guys, transparency, trust, client satisfaction.
I take tremendous pride in building a house for kids of people my dad built houses for. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. And to be able to relay those stories and tell those stories that's fun. Mm-hmm. And I think the people that I'm going to be able to work with, that are going to be able to work for me, they get it. The people that don't, I'm not their guy. And it's, the looks on some people's faces, many times I've handed somebody their plans back, and it's always kind of that same look of disbelief. It's like, I'm not your guy, and I don't need to sign myself up for a 10-month ass kicker. So, here's your plans, because we're not going to get along. You're great. We're going to be friends. And the way we're going to stay friends is you're going to go find somebody else to build your house, because I'm not your guy. It's not the experience that you're going to enjoy. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually better than, biting the bullet and taking it. And then it's just a disaster. And I literally had a lady one day in my office. We were going over her plans, getting ready to start pricing things out. And she made the comment to me that, "Oh, you're just going to hate me when this is over because I'm just so picky." And I rolled her plans back up and handed them back.
Noted.
I said, "You know what? I don't work that."
Thanks for
that was the last red flag.
I'm not
the last red flag.
Yeah.
At least you're honest.
I'm not your guy.
Yeah.
Now
here's my white flag.
I've run into her. I've run into her many times since then, and she has always been so nice. And one time it was actually said that you're right. It would have been a disaster. So.
Yeah.
But again, that gets back to like Brad saying, it's a business. And you should treat it as such. It's a business.
Yeah. I think Brad was saying that if you want to be around for a long time, you got to structure your business correctly. I think when you are around for a long time, you build confidence, and then you can do things like what Scott's saying, like, hey, you're not my client. I don't need you. I got plenty of jobs. You can start to be a little picky yourself.
But you also have to recognize too, something that I've kind of light to the game. We recognized it started about 3 years ago, that the market's changing. And I spent the first 10 years being able to run on the fact that everybody around here knows my company name and knows the sign and knows the symbol, because it's been around for so long. The last 5 years, the number of transplants we have coming here, they don't know me from a hole in the wall. I'm no different from anybody else in the market. So being able, it goes back to running a good business and recognizing your business. And 5 years ago, I had no advertising budget. And now we spend about $20,000 to $25,000 a year. It's not that big of a budget, but it's a hell of a lot more than zero. And it's because I've got to be cognizant of the fact that there are people coming in that they don't know me from anybody else, and I've got to be able to pull them in. So it's upgrading the website and doing all those kinds of things that I didn't pay any attention to 5 years ago, and being able to recognize it and be able to make that pivot is very important.
I love it. This is great. This was a good conversation. I feel less intimidated.
You got 3 episodes. You got 3 episodes out of this.
Yeah, that's right. Brad, what were you saying?
We're ready to chop it up. Yeah, we'll chop it up.
You're always so positive, Reese.
Reese's your segment can be a standalone podcast. Drinking Athletic and Modelo.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Yeah, which I will say the Modelo is getting rusty over here because I'm just slamming this Athletic.
Hey, man, I'm with you. I'm with you. Athletic is wonderful.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's
Athletic.
funny. So just trying to be halfway healthy, right? That's like, I think how we got here with this, but it's funny how our entire company culture went really healthy, like seemingly in several months. It's like, as soon as the everyone wanted to have a gym challenge, and then it was that challenge, and it's something else, and now it's like, oh, now we keep beer in the fridge, but it's non-alcoholic beer. So it's
I love it. That's a strong culture.
It's turning pretty damn good. I like it.
I love it. Yeah, nice strong culture over there, Brad. You're doing good things. Same with you, Scott. We're just keeping it real with Modelo's, keeping the beers real. The electric jelly, couldn't find it, but
yeah, I was about to say, no, you're not going to find the jellyfish in Denver.
Yeah.
So,
well, when I'm
that's
in
your
Austin.
loss, though. That's your loss.
Yeah, I'll get one.
When you're in Austin, you know what to get.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, you've got to.
That's right.
I don't know if this beer beats beer out of a boot, though. So we always have that story. We always have that story.
Well, run it back, Brad. Let's hear it. Let's give the listeners a little history here.
Oh man, so Reese has long roots in this game, right? So starting in his Builder Trend days, right?
The old
BT. We can say that out loud here.
Sure. It's a fine piece of software.
The evil empire. The evil empire.
Oh, okay.
No bad mouthing, but it's like
easy, Scott. Ooh, easy.
I killed my co-construct. So, anyway,
all right. Back to the story. Yes.
Once upon a time, we went to Omaha, and Reese was still part of the big regime, and we got to go out after it's BT University, right? So we're like,
BTU.
It's a good happy hour. Yeah, BTU. It's a good happy hour to start with, and then Reese likes to end that trip by taking you downstairs to some Howl at the Moon.
The Crescent Moon.
And you drink. It's
good
Das
Reuben.
Boot. It's Das Boot, right? So it's like you get these big glass boots, and Reese's goal is to get us to drink as many as we can. And
that's right.
The time that they have left while they're open.
So I will say, you go down. For the listeners out there, if you've never drank beer out of a boot, do it. But they're like liters. They're like multiple liters of beer. And these aren't like Modelo's and Bud Lights. This is like a nice Dunkel or a nice Hefeweizen. And you're just slamming beers. And so what you do is usually you go down there with a group of people, you'll get a boot, and there's actually like rules to it. Like if you put the beer on the table before you thump it and drink or something like that, there's some kind of rule behind it. They have the whole sheets there. But I'm like, let's go get boots. And we probably had 6, 7 builders. And everyone gets their own boot. And I'm like, all right, buckle up. We're doing this. So everyone had personal boots. And, you get a group of fine American contractors in a basement bar just slamming German beers. Got a little crazy. But always been in this game. Love the builder.
Good time.
Good times.
Yeah,
that's right.
We might have to post that picture when we launch this. We might have to post that picture of the OG, the old white tee Brad in the picture.
Was I in a white tee that
night?
Oh my god!
I'm just being squirrely. I'm a nickname giver. We got Dr. Dollar up here. We got white tee Brad. Scott. I don't really have a nickname for you. I will just call you the Electric Jelly.
Why don't you call him Spicy Bland?
There you go.
Spicy Bland.
Spicy Bland.
It's like, that's the
You're in the land of Texas. You could sell that for like brisket or something.
Perfect.
I don't know. Actually, no. Spicy Bland. Is that an oxymoron?
Yeah. That's an oxymoron.
Do you want to know the question of
it's like military?
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. Come on.
Okay.
We gotta finish this way. So Scott, who's the better builder, Chip Gaines or you?
Oh, me. That's not a question.
See,
he would say that.
There you go. That's the sound.
He would admit that.
Who's the better marketer?
Absolutely. Now, there you go. Yes, that would be his comeback. Absolutely.
There you go.
Yes. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Who does not disappoint a crowd when it's announced that a builder from Waco is coming to speak and you walk out and they all go, oh.
Who likes demo more, you or Chip?
Builder from...
Who likes demo day more?
Chip. Yeah, Chip. I hate demo day. Yeah, it's Chip.
Yeah. Well, that's our goal. We'll have to get what's his name? Chip Gaines?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, from the
Chip
HGTV now. Is he in Waco?
Yeah, we'll get him on.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess
Wait, hold on. He has his own network now. They've got their whole they got their own TV network. Let's just talk about the king of, marketing right there. That's
Brad, what path are you on?
They made man. They made it happen, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
so they made it happen.
If somebody wants to will it into existence, I don't know if I'm camera ready.
Dude, we have another builder up in Boston.
I'm not.
That has his own TV show, and I was actually talking about it. It's actually pretty interesting. Like, it's the Heart of Oak, PJ and Tonic. He's got his own show, and he's getting ready to rerun a series and stuff. But he just did it locally, and I think it was like you have to talk to him about it. But yeah, no, it's actually pretty interesting. Heart of Oak. He does some sweet stuff. Yeah, Heart of Oak. Yeah, he does some sweet stuff.
Yeah, I like Nick. I like Nick Schiffer up there, man. His stuff is always A1 classy, man. Like, his stuff is golden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
he's authentic. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just saying, out in Vegas, had a chance to run into him, and he's, I think he's doing it right.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Definitely.
He's super authentic. Like you're at the end. Reese at the end of the podcast here is like, cost plus builder just overrunning on cost here, but instead of cost, just add an extra discussion to the end of the podcast here.
We've got Matt's over here. He's like, dude, we should be making calls right now. What are we not doing this right now? we got the old trusty CEO just cracking down on output here. All right, everybody. It was a great episode, great conversation. This was deep. This was a good one.
This is great. This is really good.
Yeah, appreciate you, Scott. Appreciate you, Brad.
Hopping
on. This was good.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah. Appreciate you, fellas.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yep. We'll see you.
Awesome.
This was fun.
You guys have a good one.
Yeah, let us know when you want to do it again.
All right. Sounds good.
See you guys.
Yeah.